Hi, I'm Kevin McGeary, author, musician, and Edinburgh Fringe performer, and today I'm going to discuss 4 books I've read recently. So I'll start with one that I haven't finished yet and probably won't finish till September because I won't be bringing it to Edinburgh with me, but it is The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky, which is one of the great novels of ideas. So my copy is full of post-it notes, although enjoyment probably isn't the right word to describe my experience of reading it, but here is a standout quote. This thirst for life is often called base by certain consumptive milksop moralists, especially the poets. It is somewhat Karamazovian feature, to be sure, this thirst for life in spite of everything, and it also without question dwells in you. But why is it base? There's still an awful lot of centripetal force left on our planet. Life wants to be lived, and I live it, even though it goes against logic. So it's 3 very different brothers with very different ideas about life, and I've heard that the final act is very suspenseful, and I sure hope it is, because it is a bit of a slog at this point in time, admittedly, although there are so many podcasts, mostly male-dominated ones, that argue that it's the greatest book ever written, so I hope they turn out to be right. Another novel, a more than 500-page tome by Isabel Allende, The Infinite Plan, published in the early 90s. Here's a standout quote. Love is music and sex is only the instrument, Olga told me, but it took me more than half my life to find my center, and that's why I had such a hard time learning to play the music. So it's not one of Allende's best, I don't think, and it's also one of her longest. It often shifts into the first person unannounced, while mostly being in the third person, which I found very jarring. But even a subpar Isabel Allende book is still well worth your time. So that's The Infinite Plan. On to non-fiction, I've reread Music, the Brain, and Ecstasy by Robert Jourdain, who's a popular science writer and also a musician. And I actually read this 20 years ago when I was taking an MA in creative writing. I bought it when I was working in America that summer. And here's a brief quote. Like the vast majority of animal species that have existed over time, the vast majority of instruments have had their day and are now extinct. The monster tubas enjoyed their Jurassic period in the late 19th century. Animal species die out when they cannot adapt to a changing environment. Instruments disappear when they cannot adapt to the demands of changing musical styles. So this book is a lot drier than I remembered it having been, because Jourdain is a scientist by background. And the last one is Breakneck, China's Quest to Engineer the Future by Wang, who is a technology writer who specializes in writing about China. So he's written for the New York Times, Financial Times, and many more. And it's about the contrasting approach of China and the US. So the US is a lawyer state. It has been since the 1830s, at least. Most US presidents went to law school. Most senators and Congress people also have some background in law, whereas China is an engineering state. Most members of the Politburo Standing Committee, that's the most senior officials in the country, are engineers by background, and it really shows in their no-nonsense attitude to progress and economics. And it's a very brief book about the contrasting strengths and weaknesses of these approaches. So here's a quote. I sometimes think of Tianjin's library as a metaphor for China's economy. Great hardware that looks impressive from a distance, not filled with the softer stuff that actually matters. Tianjin could have focused on filling its amazing skyscrapers with better businesses. Instead, it could only build more hollow shells while it gained considerable debt. So any economy is going to have pockets of inefficiency, but China became notorious in the past 20 years for ghost cities. That's cities with factories, hospitals, sewage systems, etc., but nobody actually living in them, because sometimes they, in their quest to build, they lose sight of what they're building for. So it's a short and insightful book about the merits and the downfalls of both the American and the Chinese approach to building their country, and how, above all else, that they are no two people on earth are more similar than Americans and Chinese in Dan Wang's opinion and in mine.